it wound up getting seen by Michael B. Jordan, and his team had reached out, and that was solely off of that one that he saw and liked, and led him to be like, who is this girl? And, let's look into her story more.
Hello, everyone. Have another episode here of Ordinary Excellence. Really excited for this one. Should be a little bit different than some of the other ones I had. Have Sabrina here. She has a really interesting story. She's from the Bethesda area, which also was born and raised in, for anyone who doesn't know. So knew her from my childhood and my younger days. And she ultimately moved to LA and is thriving there and living a really interesting life. So thought it would be a great person to have on this next episode. Sabrina, you can kind of kick us off here with maybe the cliff notes of your life, just starting from a childhood and then moving to LA, but just a brief one.
Okay, starting from childhood, I was doing print modeling, dance, and commercial acting. So I was doing all of that while going to school. So grew up in Bethesda while simultaneously going to New York pretty much every week and missing school sometimes. I did like Lion King too, so I played young Nala for about a year and a half. And then pretty much my teen years, I was going to dance conventions and competitions and traveling on tour a lot. And then acting, I was always acting and doing theater, things like that in school in Bethesda, and then also outside of it. And then graduated high school early, went to college in New York City and for acting as well, and then moved to LA to finish out my degree for acting here. Started my production company, and kind of started sharing my journey on TikTok, and everything kind of took off from then in 2020.
Yeah, so we're going to unfold pretty much that entire story. I just wanted to start off with the cliff notes. So I think the good starting point would be from a childhood age. You talked about, being in Bethesda, but also traveling to New York City quite often. Can you just tell the audience a little bit like the reason behind that?
Yeah, so pretty much everything was happening in New York City. My parents put me in print modeling pretty early on, so I modeled for like Gap, Target, a lot of back to school stuff, and just kid campaigns for clothing and things like that. And then also doing like playing Lion King, like all the rehearsals were pretty much New York, and traveling and doing a lot of circ training, and the best dance programs were usually in New York City. So I would basically go to school, sometimes skip school, and come back and just kind of go back and forth every single week. And that was basically my life till I was like 13. Around 13 is when I started touring. So I was touring for dance pretty much and doing conventions, competitions, and on the road a lot more. And that was pretty much going on until I was like 16.
Okay. And what age did this first start?
My parents put me in print modeling when I was 6 months old.
Okay. And how was it like that young? How did you first start off with? Obviously, maybe don't remember exactly how it was feeling, but from your memory, like how was it? Was it like really forced and you had to get into it, or was it something where like you had a passion right away?
I think I had a passion right away. My parents kind of just always put me in everything with the understanding that they're very artistic people, and they wanted me to have the option to at least have the skills developed for everything. So aside from print modeling, acting, dance, I was also doing music, singing, and I'm classically trained in piano, guitar, flute, violin, everything, you name it. And it was always something I cared to do, and my parents were very, if you don't want to do this, you can stop. I actually quit ballet when I was like 3 and went to pursue more of an athletic route as a kid for a while. So went and started playing soccer on like a travel team and then things like that when I was a little bit older in that window of time, and then simultaneously like got into things like lacrosse and all of that. And so my parents were always really supportive, and it never felt like any of the things I was doing I had to stick with it. It's just like I wanted to, so I found my way back to that stuff over time.
Okay. And then you obviously were going between Bethesda and New York. How often would you say in a week span you were in Bethesda versus New York?
It depends. So if it was just like a rehearsal week, I'd try to prioritize being in school more so. My parents always wanted me in school, which is what prevented me from going to LA at a super young age. So my parents' rule was like, you can do, all the training and anything that's nearby, but they didn't want me to basically take off school to be homeschooled to go pursue acting in TV full time. And then if it was something like auditions, I remember, I took off like 3 weeks from school because I was doing major auditions and doing some callbacks for some bigger roles and stuff in New York City. That was 3 weeks missed. But all my teachers were super supportive too, and the school knew what was going on. So,
And one thing when you're saying all this is I definitely kind of wish I had that part of my life. I was so focused on soccer that I couldn't really find passions outside of it. It's just work, soccer, school, pretty much the three. Obviously, there's other things that chime in there, but definitely like it would be nice to like redo life and see how it would be to just follow like multiple different passions. But with that, you would say dance was at the pinnacle of like all of your passions when you were younger, correct?
pretty much, I think I would say that for perspective wise, like how other people perceived it was definitely that, and how I would present myself was very much dance at the front. I think acting was always something in the background and me making movies, but I never really told anyone about that. It was more so just like something I kept to myself. And then acting was like something I didn't want to fall into being like a theater kid in high school and middle school. So I kind of just would secretly go do the shows or like be part of the theater class and chose that as my elective in high school, but it wasn't something I ever wanted advertised or would really tell people about. So it was definitely like always dance, 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 dance. Yeah.
And talk us a little bit through about in your childhood, middle school, high school years, the dance experience, and ultimately, like you mentioned, you had to stop due to injury. What like kind of talk us through that entire experience?
Yeah, dance was, is definitely like something I really love and I'm passionate about to this day. I just can't really do it to the same extent and level that I could. I was a ballerina and I had offers to go be in different companies, which was really typically a dancer's career. You're ending, 20 is like you're pushing out. So it's very that lifestyle. And so at a young age, around like 14, I was auditioning for placements and doing, different auditions for schools as well, and had been accepted to a few different programs, including Juilliard, Joffrey, places like that. And it was something I really loved and thought I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. When I was 15, I went through something and that changed my body, and that was just something that I couldn't do anymore. Dance was no longer feasible. It wasn't something that I physically was going to be able to do, and then mentally it was like I couldn't tap myself or force myself to get back into it really, and so I kind of steered away from that. And yeah.
And how were the emotions when you ultimately had to steer away from it?
I think it was a lot. It was kind of the realization like you've spent your whole life training for something to the highest level. And I think as an athlete, like you understand that. And a lot of people do when you spend your whole life really training hard for something and you're really good at it too. So you're putting in all these hours and then you kind of just injury either takes you out or it's like you're not good enough to go to the next level and what that looks like and feels like. But I feel like every athlete kind of understands that if they really were pursuing it to that extent in, at that level and at that age. But yeah, it's kind of, I guess, the equivalent for athletes, who can't continue on in college or go pro type of thing.
Yeah, and I definitely resonate with that. And as an athlete myself, totally those feelings make sense. Definitely know people who had to stop because of injury, despite having all that passion and being at a high level. Also, people who just filtered out, and that's just like kind of how the sport works.
Yeah.
Comes with a lot of emotions, but typically most people end up on the bright side, as you did after it, after kind of the emotions flood away. And so, talk us through what ages were you at Juilliard?
So I actually was supposed to go 15, and then because of what I went through, I couldn't. So I wound up going to different schools, and then I actually only last year was kind of full circle. I went back, but not for dance, for acting. So I actually went to Juilliard last year, 2024.
Okay, so you went very recently. So
Yeah.
then taking us to high school, you graduated early. What was the decision behind that?
I really want to just get out of that environment. I loved where I went to school, and my friend group, I had a very interesting experience. I think I was like going through the worst time of my life. Nobody knew. And you're going through like, I just wanted life to end pretty much, and every day felt like the worst experience of my life because of what I was going through, and simultaneously dealing with high school nonsense in a way was just really put a lot of things into perspective of like, none of this matters, and I don't care about any of this. And I think I had that realization in like geometry class, and I was like, I need to go to the counselor, and just requested. I had really great grades, and I was already ahead for all of my classes, so requested, can I take the exams to basically test out of the school and double up on classes. And I think I just really wanted to tap into getting into my career and be surrounded by a different environment and get away from just high school party life a little bit more, and be able to focus on what I actually wanted to achieve as much as possible.
And that all makes sense. So then talk us through what the next step was. And then actually before that, I'm curious to hear, did you receive any pushback from family, friends, even the school? I'm sure the school is a pretty obvious answer, but what type of pushback did you receive? What type of support did you receive, and how did you deal with that?
My family didn't really want me to graduate early. They were like, "Where? Why?" And my friends, I guess, I don't think any of my friends took it seriously. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm graduating this year," and everyone thought it was a joke. And then graduation came, and I was like giving all of my friends graduation tickets, and it was kind of like a moment of my friend group actually like crying, because everyone was like, "Oh, Sabrina's leaving and we're not going to see her anymore," and we didn't take this seriously all year. School wise, I think I got pushback from some teachers, surprisingly. I was taking like multiple English classes, and one of my English teachers, he didn't want me to graduate early, and then also was like not a fan of where I was applying for school, and then basically tried to accuse me of plagiarism on a paper, which wound up being a really tedious process. And I had to go basically tell one of my former English teachers what was going on, and her and I were really close, and she actually kept some of my old papers and was like, the writing style is actually very similar, and I write in a very specific way. And she went and gathered a couple of the other English teachers, and everybody kind of came together and were able to prove that I did write it. But that was a whole process, and is something that has always kind of stuck with me, because I remember asking him, why would you think that I couldn't write this? And he was like, I didn't think someone like you could write that. And it was really interesting because it was such a personal experience, and I think that was something that kind of went over his head too. But yeah.
And then after that, talk us through like your next steps after graduating. What happened for you next?
So I go to school in New York City, and while in New York City, I'm at one school for acting. Simultaneously, I was going to another school, and I was doing communications.
Wait, which schools were that? Just so everyone knows.
I was at AMDA, and I was doing Columbia's School of General Studies, and it was a lot of work doing two schools at once. And then AMDA is a performing arts school, so it's just all performing arts all the time, and it's really rigorous and very cutthroat. And their New York campus is very rooted in theater. So I was getting told, I wasn't a theater kid really. I was always like TV, film, commercial style, very LA. And I was the youngest there in my class, and then I'm getting told, you suck at this because of this, you suck at this class because of this. And I just really didn't want to be there. I was like, wow, I guess I'm one of those kids that's good in my hometown, but not good enough for New York. But it was really just that I wasn't good enough for theater, and it wasn't something I was passionate about. So I'm very a more minute actor that acts with my facial expressions rather than my whole body, which theater is like, you have to act with your whole body to sell to a 300th seat in, you know, the round. And for me, it was a learning experience, and then simultaneously taking classes at another school, and I'm just running around and I'm a minor in this new experience, and it was just a lot. And every professor was like, you need to go to LA for TV and be a TV actor. And I think simultaneously AMDA is a school that you're not supposed to be auditioning. So I was so fed up with how how everything was going in class that I was like, I'm just gonna go audition for TV and film that shoots out here in New York. So I would skip class sometimes if my professor said that they weren't they weren't going to be there or something. I'd skip that class to go do an audition. And so one of the days that I did that, my professor had said he wasn't going to be in. I had an audition for Law and Order, and I get there. My professor skipped class because he was one of the producers on Law and Order. So he's sitting there and he's like, you're not supposed to be here right now. So I just kind of that experience of like, okay, you're not supposed to be auditioning. You're not supposed to, what do you do? So I was having a miserable time actually being in New York City, and I hate the cold. So winter was not fun. And I came up with a plan. Luckily, AMDA had an LA campus. So I transferred over, went to LA. And I went to LA like maybe 8 months before the pandemic happened. And I was graduating early already from school. So finished school in the pandemic in May of 2020. And I had leased an apartment out here so for the year. So I was like, I can't go home now that the pandemic has started. And what am I going to do? So I started my production company, and I had basically been doing a lot of film stuff while I was at AMDA simultaneously with acting and everything. And yeah, I just started posting kind of behind the scenes stuff on TikTok and my journey, and being one of the youngest Black women at the time owning a production company was something that really appealed to people and just kind of took off, and many eyes on me for that all the time.
So before we talk about the production company, kind of the life at or kind of all your stuff that you're doing in LA, I want to talk through just how your experience was being in LA during COVID. Just overall, how were the vibes there? How was your experience?
It was good. It was just, I guess, empty. Like there was no traffic, so I wasn't dealing with anything, but the industry wasn't thriving. The thing was, I lived right next to Warner Bros. At the time, and I kind of took advantage of LinkedIn and Warner Bros. To reach out to a bunch of different people who were working at Warner who weren't doing anything at the time, and offer to buy them lunch, which I was spending probably like $3,000 every like 2 months on buying people lunch, which was insane because I wasn't working a full-time job at that time. I wasn't working a job at all. I was literally doing like DoorDash, walking dogs, Rover, and doing like WAG and Rover at the time. And all my money was going to buying people lunch to pick their brain and like get on their radar that I existed. And simultaneously, I think doing TikTok, it kind of started bringing in more money. So I was able to like put that into productions. And then at the same time, I think like midway of 2020, late 2020 is when production started picking up again. Every single person I had met with remembered me and was like either sending me for auditions, having me come read for things on the Warner lot, or just like plucking me for different opportunities or bringing me in as a director for stuff.
And who do you think was the most interesting or like impactful conversation that you had with someone from Warner?
Probably one of the execs. He gave me a really great piece of advice in regards to just kind of always not being afraid to be seen trying. And I think that really pushed me into like not caring as much about posting myself on social media and being seen as like, oh, social media is like kind of cringe and whatever. Like it was something that made me, you know, really propelled me forward. And then I think from there, doing He's All That, which was Miramax Film and Netflix, and with Addison Rae and everyone there. That was, I got to shadow Mark Waters on that, and then I started as a dancer on that, which was like really interesting because I wasn't really dancing in the film. And then just getting to be on set for that all the time and work with such amazing people and see how Mark Waters worked. And I loved him because he had directed Mean Girls and Freaky Friday, and just one of my favorite directors. And he gave me so much insight to the industry, and not really many people can say they got that chance to kind of, you know, sit hand in hand with an iconic director like that. And that really changed the course of my directing really fast.
And how do you feel, like, how does it feel when you're in front of like someone of that much influence as a director? Also, you're talking about Addison Rae, obviously she was blowing up at the time, super famous. How does it feel when like you haven't necessarily gotten up, now you're kind of in that circle, in that bubble, but before then, when you're kind of just face to face with these type of people of influence, how do you kind of act? How does it feel?
I think really honestly the same all around. I've never really looked at celebrities as celebrities because I've kind of always grown up on the outskirts of the industry, and kind of at the end of the day we're all doing the same thing. So even where I went to college, it was just all the time we'd have celebrity guests come in, or even growing up I would get to go dance, and it's like I'm working with Jojo Gomez, who's choreographing for Tinashe, and we were in the same rooms as a lot of different singers and artists that we really liked, and like at a very young age got to work with and meet like Justin Bieber, things like that. I think for me, I always just look at it as like these are people who come to work and I come to work, and we're just like privileged to kind of work on the same projects together. And I think more and more through the years, like I don't really get starstruck. I think mainly I more so get starstruck in the political space, like people who are public figures that I really look up to, who have amazing stories or have really done amazing things with their lives.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, especially when you were growing up with those people and face to face with them at a young age. So now talk us through your production company at the core of your life, and the name, how it started, why you started it, and like ultimately the progression that it's had.
Yeah, so I started my production company 2020. I originally called it Yellow Rain Productions. It was supposed to be rain made out of sunshine because I had found a card that one of my teachers from 7th grade, Mr. Wong, had given me, and it said like, for someone whose life has been, really gray and dull, you're really always just find a way to smile and find the good out of the bad, and it's like rain made out of sunshine. And slowly with TikTok it became more and more well known. Had a TikTok that went super viral, and it was like 12 million in one night, and basically the next day was just every news outlet kind of picking up that story, and BuzzFeed had reached out to me and was like, hey, we want to run this story on you and interview you. And I sat down with them and kind of spun the narrative, because that story was essentially about me being interrupted really rudely in a meeting, and I was like, I want to kind of boost my company with this. And so I did, and then that turned into millions and millions of people worldwide kind of knowing what we were and what I was doing. And just every single person started calling my team left and right. So my manager was getting calls from like major directors, different production companies, people who wanted to sit down and have generals with me. So that actually propelled me into getting hired a lot more for directing music videos, commercials, things like that. Simultaneously, I was always writing. So I wound up getting signed for literary, and they started shopping my stuff. And then I was also ghostwriting for a lot of people and writing scripts and also just articles for different places. And it all just kind of came together with TikTok, and slowly all of my work started getting seen more and more and more. And then I wound up getting signed for directing, got signed, was already signed for acting. Through the years, kind of just shared my work even more. Same thing with Instagram. And then basically things took off. I sat down like 2 years ago with a VC firm, and I started like searching for capital and wanting to expand my company. I like reached a place where I wanted to expand it and could. And so I won this competition with a VC competition, and they sat me down and were like, your company is really great. but you're in that, $200,000 range. Like your company's valuation is going to always cap around 200 to 300,000 versus if you turned it into a holdings company and this guy's like giving me crazy amounts of advice and I'm writing everything down on like printer paper. My hands, like the ink is literally smearing and I'm hoping that I can retain all of this information. Basically, I spent the year 2024 transforming the entire company and doing everything that he said. So by August of 2024, we relaunched as Extinguished Youth, which is essentially we make films for the kids who had to grow up too soon and gifted kid burnout, and like the concept of teens, young adults, and these coming of age adolescent films and stories. And we launched several branches. So we have People You Know, which is our event branch and mentorship program that mentors and offers event opportunities and networking partnerships with underrepresented filmmakers. We have our main production house, which is making all kinds of narrative films. And then we have our branch called Flexio, which is in collaboration with another production company, Clash of the Artistic Minds. And we do documentary and narrative and biopics that are all based on athletes. So we house IP and the rights to some of the biggest athletes in the world and their stories. And then we have another branch that's all literary. So we have books being made, and we started partnering with creators and tapping into the creator economy. So we have like 30 contracted creators whose followings amass 80 million. So it grew. And the valuation went from the $200,000 range to this year in the $30 million range, with me completing the Pharrell Black Ambition Prize cohort.
And growing a company that full scale from like the 200,000 valuation into where you are now, what do you think were like the hardest parts that you had to deal with? And what do you think were kind of, even though it may have been tough, like the most rewarding parts of that?
I think really just learning business without having had studied business and maintaining 100% of my company. So I think originally I thought I wanted VC money, and I was so set out on that because it just sounded like a nice thing. But in really learning about it, I realized, I don't want to give up ownership of my company. I don't want to give up creative control, and I own 100% of my company. I don't have co-founders, and I don't want a board telling me what to do or what projects I can greenlight, because I do like taking a chance, and it's been hard in the years for Hollywood to take a chance on my stories. So I want to be able to do that for the next generation and another group of, individuals who look like me and, maybe are underrepresented as well. But I think just really grasping a legal understanding and business understanding. Like I was taking classes and also just reading up on legal as much as possible in business. And I've been doing Harvard Business this year. And that's pretty much for leadership principles and just how to kind of navigate a growing company and discussions and lead an entire cohort essentially. And that's been super helpful in that regard. But even just the networking and connections there and meeting other founders and CEOs who are running their companies and learning from different industries how they operate and then pulling that into the entertainment space has been really helpful.
And what has been kind of like the most rewarding things? Obviously, there's like the stuff that I can guess, but maybe something that we wouldn't expect.
I think just people's reactions overall to everything we're doing. I think the stories we tell typically resonate really well with an audience and just who's seeing it. I think like the surprising thing for me has always been people that I admire seeing my work or knowing who I am from TikTok and what I'm doing and being like, how can I help you? And the full circle kind of moment of that. I think when I first started my company, I couldn't get an investment anywhere. I couldn't get people to take me seriously. I didn't have anything that made anyone want to come on board for what I was doing. It was like me begging them to work, basically. And through the years, it's turned into me being able to turn metrics into investments, but also people dying to work with me and at a much larger scale. I think about like Octavia Spencer, Gabrielle Union, all of them like seeing my work, or I recently met Malala and she knew who I was from my political advocacy work and following me on TikTok and different people like that. And I think about that and it just kind of feels like, okay, I'm reaching the right people and I'm in the right rooms, and I have people who are way higher than me and doing more than me telling me I'm in the right rooms, and that's really rewarding. And I think just me now being in those spaces, I'm in a place where I can pay it forward to the next group of people and kind of hold the door open for others who, you know, are like me and want to be in this space as well, and really eliminate the gatekeeping aspect of the industry.
And what is the gatekeeping aspect of the industry?
I'd say it's pretty hard to break in if you don't know what you're doing. I'm super fortunate I'd definitely say part of why I was able to propel forward so easily was because I started at such a young age. So many people don't have that, and so many people don't know how the industry works. They don't understand contracts, they don't understand managers, agents, things like that, where to look for one, how to find one. And I think there's a lot that comes with getting a film greenlit, for example, or being able to launch a company or being taken seriously. And I think for me, it really has been a fight and definitely a journey, but I always remind myself it's way easier for you than it is for a lot of people. And I think even like having a platform has made it easier as well, compared to some people who don't. People don't know where to find money for their films. And that's something I understood very early on, is like at 17, I was getting some of my first grants and everything. I was like 13 sending scripts off for evaluation and winning different competitions for that. So I've been able to share with other people, you know, here are grants that you can apply to. Like there's a ton of free money for filmmaking. People just don't really know where to access that information, or how to find producers, or how to send out a cold email that you're going to get a response to. I have a 99% cold email response ratio, and that's basically just because I've really perfected my pitch and my personal story being something that people feel obligated to respond to, and making them want to say, like, how can I help you, instead of, you know, I can't really do anything for you. You don't have anything going for you. And just helping a lot of, you know, aspiring filmmakers and actors understand what materials they have to have and should have to be able to get hired. And then also on the side of, I think, paywall and everything, I've done that, pretty much created an audience and done this anti-gatekeeping thing completely free, and providing these resources just through videos and social media. Whereas a lot of people are like, hey, buy my course to do this. And I think that just creates more gatekeeping.
And so before we dive into kind of the other part of your life, which is the public figure part, I just want to hear the number one advice that you would give to anyone trying to break in the industry. If you had to pick one thing that you have to tell everyone.
One thing I would tell people, I'd pass on the don't be afraid to be seen trying. I think that too many people wait till everything's perfected, and I think that you don't need perfect does not equate to, you know, any outcome. And I think something being done rather than something being perfect is a lot more important in this industry. It's okay if something has flaws. I would rather just get it in front of an audience and get people talking about it, because you never know who's going to see it. And sometimes it's the biggest cats in the industry calling you because they saw your freaking Instagram reel. And you wouldn't be on their radar otherwise. And I think social media too, people get frustrated with posting and their videos not necessarily being seen, but it's sometimes the videos that you keep up that have the least engagement that do the best, or in terms of who they land in front of. I had a video that I really wanted to take down on Instagram Reels like 2 years ago, and I think it was my lowest interacted video, and it wound up getting seen by Michael B. Jordan, and his team had reached out, and that was solely off of that one that he saw and liked, and led him to be like, who is this girl? And, you know, let's look into her story more. And I think that those opportunities just come from you being vulnerable and willing to put yourself out there, and not really caring what the numbers are and who's interacting with it.
I'm a firm believer of that. It really does not matter what other people think. You have to do what's best for your life, because you'll have friends, you'll have family, but you're the only one who's going to be there with yourself for the rest of your life. Curious to hear what that reel was that caught Michael B. Jordan's eye.
It was actually a reel of me talking about like my first directing gig in New York City was this. I was 16 or 17, and like I'm telling the story, and it's a flash forward. Basically, I said like flash forward, years later, I get, reached out to by this producer who comes across me on TikTok. It's the same producer who hired me for my first gig directing a YouTube skit. And that YouTube skit had only paid like $100-something or something like that. And the check bounced, and I never really bothered to try and cash it, but I was just so excited to be getting that money versus like now what I'm getting in directing is like, I never even thought that I could be getting paid the money that I'm making directing and producing and writing and acting. And so I had made a TikTok kind of telling that journey of how that producer remembered me and was like, you were so professional at just 17. And he pitched me for a major directing gig with a studio, and I wound up getting it. And that was my first studio gig. And he was like, she doesn't have as many credits as some of these major directors you're looking at, but she's good and I can guarantee she'll get the job done. And I was basically talking about how it's really important for us to kind of always just do the best you can and treat every opportunity as if it is a professional opportunity, whether you're doing it for free, whether you're doing it for $10 or you're doing it for $10,000. And how that will always pay forward because people will remember you as the one who showed up and showed out no matter what level you're working with and who you're working with.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So now to dive into the other part of your life. So you've mentioned it a few times, but TikTok. Talk us through kind of the first video you made, the video that you were talking about that kind of blew up your public figure on TikTok, and then how that's kind of continued to have an influence in your life in LA.
TikTok, okay, first video I made was I was shooting like a short film in the pandemic, and we had all gotten tested for COVID. I think I was camera operating, I was directing, I was doing the sound, I was doing every single role on a crew because we wanted to keep it a small crew because of COVID. And it was like a shot of me like camera operating and directing with masks, and I had an actress in a bathtub that was like all bloody. And I posted like, come to set with me, like to my COVID set or something. That video had like 70,000 views. And then people were asking me like, can you make more stuff or share like how you started this or what camera you're using and blah, blah, blah. So I started making videos following up with that. I had just finished a short film that was about trafficking. I had just finished another short film that was on the circuit at the time about foster care and domestic violence. And then I think people, commented like, a lot of your films seem to have very similar subject matter. Like, why is that? So I responded to that comment, and I kind of just stared blankly ahead. It was kind of a trend, is like you're just staring blankly ahead of like the Me Too movement essentially. And the caption was Me Too. And that opened up the floor. That video was like my first million view video. And I talked about, that's why I tell the stories that I do at my company. And then flash forward, the video that sent me the 12 million overnight video was me in a meeting for a feminine product that I was hired to direct for a Valentine's Day commercial. And I'm presenting, and I asked at the beginning like all questions till the end, and this man just kept interrupting me, and he's like, well, the problem with you women is, and I started recording after he said that because I was just irritated and I was going to send it over to my agents. And then he kept interrupting, and I was like, I said in the video, well, I appreciate your ability to talk on and on. My ears do have a limit, and please put yourself on mute. And it was a very risky move. I put it on my close friend story, actually, and a couple of my friends who are TikTokers and they're, DJs as well. They had posted, they had responded, and they were like, you should post this. I did, and I didn't think that there was going to be a crazy reaction to it, and there was, and it was mainly a lot of women being like, oh my god, I deal with this too, and XYZ, and like I cut out parts of the video because I didn't want to reveal what the brand was, who the guy was, anything like that. And he didn't work for the brand, he worked for the marketing agency that the brand was using. And the video just like hit 12 million within, it started hitting like 6 million first, and I realized like, oh, there are so many eyes on my account right now. I can capitalize off of this really quickly and let people know what I do and what's going on. So I made a follow-up video giving context to that. And I said, hi, I'm Sabrina. I'm 19. I have a production company, whatever. Explained like what I make and what I do. Like every female founder of major companies, every women CEOs all over the world reaching out and in that comment section being like, well, we would hire you and we want to hire you and XYZ. And so my email was just getting flooded and it was like all these companies being like, hey, we want to bring you in to do this, we want to offer you an opportunity for this. So that actually catapulted my commercial directing side of things and creative directing. And so I went on to creative direct for Taco Bell and Walmart and different things like that, Uber, just off of them finding me off of that video and that leading them to going to my website and really liking my work and hiring me.
That's huge. Wow. Yeah. And then I would say before we like kind of move off from TikTok, what would you say are like I guess we kind of know what the best parts are. What do you think are like the toughest parts about, having a following, keeping up with that? What do you think are like the most difficult things of being a public eye in social media?
I think people have a weird parasocial relationship with you, and it can get a little frustrating. And I think people's understanding of whatever they've built you up to be in their head is all you can be. I think I equally use social media as a place to share my personal story and being a survivor, as well as my politics and like legislative work with survivors, and then also my directing girl boss content. And I think it's very interesting. It impacts, I would say, my regular 20-something-year-old life very much in a very interesting way. I think it impacts my dating life. It impacts how men see me. It impacts how women see me and like mothers and things. And I think like a lot of times, sometimes like I'll post something and it's just me being a regular 24-year-old, or like when I was like 22, I'm posting something and it's maybe people who started following me for my personal story and my legislative journey, and I'm getting DMs from those people, like people I don't know, being like, you're supposed to be a role model for kids and do XYZ, or like I'm having fun or drinks with friends. It's like I'm 23, 24 years old and people are like, oh, like you shouldn't be posting that, or these types of things. And then on the other side of it, it's like you kind of get boxed in or maybe not taken as seriously in certain spaces. So like politically, it's actually done really well for me and has been very beneficial on that side. On the side of the industry itself, sometimes it's very easy for people to kind of write off everything that I've built on my own and be like, well, she gets XYZ opportunity because she has a TikTok following. And it's like, those things don't correlate at all. And it's just my TikTok has always been me sharing my work. So maybe some people come across me because of TikTok, but I wouldn't be getting hired if I wasn't good and if my work wasn't good enough, So it just gets a little frustrating with what people can, define you as, and everyone has an opinion, and it's really easy to fall into like reading hate comments or just people kind of exploiting. I mean, there's some really terrible things that people say on the internet sometimes, and I think even just with my personal story, that stuff is just very jarring to read sometimes, and it can be a bit much. But I think I kind of just take breaks for when I want to and just have figured out, I don't need to be on there all the time. I have people who sometimes run my accounts if it's being a little bit too much for me. And then sometimes, I haven't posted on my main account probably in like 8 months now or something, like 6 months. And then I have like a spam account that's just like fun and for my girls, and like my For You page is not all political or like really serious content. It's all just like fun stuff. So
yeah, it's a lot to dive into, but it seems like you're navigating it well, which is all you really can do. I want to talk about what's behind you. So Miss Bethesda USA, and then also the political work you've been doing, and then the law you were able to get passed.
Yeah.
So you can start off with Miss Bethesda, how that came about, and experience.
I think 2022, actually, like end of 2022 is when that started. So like I said, I was doing print work. print modeling, have been doing that since I was a kid. And the Miss USA family had reached out to me and they said, you know, you're a perfect candidate. We've seen your stuff in TikToks. Would you be interested in joining? And I kind of did pageants. I had done like Miss Teen Bethesda, like Miss Teen Maryland before, but I had never thought about doing it as an adult. And I really do love and admire what the Miss USA organization really stands for and has become. I think people are very quick to write it off as women in bikinis who look pretty, and it's like that's all that's going on there. And I think they've done a really good job of prioritizing career and philanthropy. And so it was something that resonated, and I wasn't really too sure that I was going to do it. And at first we talked about me running for in California, actually. And simultaneously, most of the pandemic, I had started a nonprofit with some friends called Wary, and we are Rising Youth, and we were working on kind of research for the ability to testify with closed circuit courts, allowing survivors, witnesses to violent crimes, trafficking survivors, and domestic violence victims to testify without being in a courtroom with their assailants. And we had talked to a couple of people, and you know, they were able to do that because of the pandemic. And I was like, this should be something that should be around full time. So I was not really sure how to go about passing a law, but I kind of remembered, you know, Bethesda, being you growing up in Bethesda, understand just how politically driven it is. And so many people work for the government. We're surrounded by so many politicians live out there. And it was something I knew, okay, how can I get in the room? I don't really have the ability to kind of just get in there because I didn't really study politics or anything. I'm not working a political job right now. I'm not in that industry or sector whatsoever. And I kind of figured, you know, the pageant girls, they always take photos with the politicians of that state or that city, and they always are kind of pushed as like the woman, like the figure, the public figure, like this figurehead of that sector. And I was like, Bethesda's kind of the perfect place. So I decided to keep my Maryland residency and ran for Miss Bethesda. And I actually used that just for politics. And that was the main purpose of that, was I really want to get in the room. And so after I became Miss Bethesda, I started emailing, and my team was emailing people, hey, can she come in for a meeting with this senator or this governor or the mayor, you know? And everybody was saying yes. Nobody was like, oh, we don't want to meet Miss Bethesda, of course. So it's like a good photo opportunity. So I basically was flying back and forth from LA to back to Bethesda all the time and meeting with them. And instead of just it being a photo opportunity, I was using it to explain the bill that I was trying to pass. And we started this really long process. Michael Lurie of Senator Susan Lee's office was one of the first people who really believed in it. And we started this really tedious process, and we realized it's not something that's exactly possible, because we're rewriting the rules of evidence. So in order for this to get done, it's going to take at least 6 years of me getting multiple politicians on board. So I was like, that's, you know, interesting. In the meantime, I had discovered Rise America, which was run by Amanda Nguyen, and she is creator of the Survivor Bill of Rights. And she had an opportunity. She created this cohort for anyone who wanted to pass legislation called Team America that would pass the Survivor Bill of Rights in each state. And so I joined for Maryland and for California. And we just kept meeting with different legislators, and all the legislators that I had met with for the law I was originally trying to pass were on board for this. And it really worked to our favor. I wound up testifying. We testified as well with the Mental Health Committee. And simultaneously, all of this was being documented. So there's actually a documentary right now, which is the one that's qualified for the Oscar, called Fenice, which is all about my journey from Bethesda, from my teen years to now, to passing a law, and the full circle of essentially getting to do that. So yeah, it was just like all tied back to the Miss USA family. And I guess that's like a good representation of what a Miss USA girl actually is. So it was a really tedious time, but fun.
Yeah, impactful, fun. Also, thanks for sharing like the entire story with that. definitely that you were involved in that is inspiring, especially at a young age. Like most people are just in college. So the fact that you're actually, adding value, not just to yourself, but to people that need it is inspiring. Now I kind of want to talk a little bit about, I remember sending you a video one time where I was watching On My Block and I was like, is that Sabrina? And I
Yeah.
remember pausing it and I was like, that's you. So tell me a little bit about like I guess the craziest experiences you've had, like people you met from the movies and TV's part of your life.
Crazy experiences. Okay, On My Black. Okay, also that crazy experiences. Definitely, He's All That. That was a very long process, and it was. I think Addison is like a really the sweetest, person, the sweetest, and it was her first movie, so it was a lot of bumps and challenging for everyone. And we were shooting during COVID. Shooting during COVID was just a chaotic trip for everyone. You're getting COVID tested like every 2 days, and you get paid with SAG for the COVID test. So it was good, but it was also just like you had to drive all the way over this place to go get tested, then you have to wait for the results. Then it's like you had people testing all the time, so production was spending tons and tons of money. I think in terms of through the years, I guess like chaotic is earlier this year. I directed Keke Palmer and Jamie Foxx, and that was probably just one of the most entertaining experiences of my life. Kiki is such a pro, and she's just the sweetest ever. And then Jamie, he's a character, and we shot at both of their houses, and Jamie is just such a character. The Lakers game was on, Lakers lost, and he was like mood shift. He's like, we gotta go. And this was like a big opportunity for me. Producing wise, it was really entertaining to produce. I've produced for some really awesome people in the past couple of years, and those have been fun. Earlier this year,
give us a little name drop, like a few names.
Will which was kind of like a full circle growing up as a kid in, his peak, listening to Black Eyed Peas and everything. And I wouldn't say his peak, he's, still making music, but definitely what we knew Black Eyed Peas as, and getting to work with him was really great and fun, and he's really nice to work with. And I think all these people are really nice and wonderful, but it's just a different experience. And then I cannot name drop this one, but I'm in pre-production right now on the biggest film that I have ever gotten to direct. I'm also acting in, and I wrote the script for. And the lead talent is like my dream person to work with, and it's someone whose films I grew up like just loving, and my parents love so much. And I remember when we got on the phone, I like immediately called my parents, and I was like, and yeah, he's coming on board to this project. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, and I have like 17 scenes with him and blah blah blah. And I think that's been really exciting. And it's more so just I get excited when it's people that I always wanted to work with or grew up, inspiring me, and those experiences. But there are just a lot of chaotic and crazy experiences. And I'm trying to think of what projects I don't have NDAs for that I could tell a good story. But I did deal last year with an actor who was a method actor, and I won't say what actor it was, but he is a method actor. And day one of me getting there, he was drunk on set, and that was a really interesting experience. And we were dealing with a gun on set, and it's obviously not loaded, but I was like, this is a lot. And there's always something going on. But yeah, those are kind of the stories and things that have come of it. So yeah, I think that's pretty much on that side of things. And then, I mean, obviously the guilds too. I will say, like, my first time at the DGA, which is the Directors Guild of America, which is like all the big directors, like, and your big actors that you watch belong to different guilds. So like there's SAG, which is Screen Actors Guild for actors, and I'm a SAG actor, and then I'm DGA director. My first time at the Directors Guild of America was for the directors awards, and I had met Steven Spielberg, and I was so nervous, like sitting at this table and I'm cutting a steak, and I realized that I didn't have a knife in my hand. I had a spoon. And he was like, "Are you nervous?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he had said, don't be nervous about places that you feel you don't belong, because you belong in the room if they invited you in for a reason. And I was like the youngest person there that night. And I had gone to the bathroom, there was no toilet paper, and I just asked the person under the stall next to me, like, "Hey, can you pass some toilet paper?" And then when I exited at the sink, it was Chloe Zhao, and this was after she won her Oscar for Best Director, making her the second woman to ever win Best Director for the Oscars. And I was like, "Oh, that's really awkward that I just asked like an Oscar winner for toilet paper," but that was fine. And yeah, then I got a nickname at the DGA as Toilet Paper Girl for like a year. And then I came back like a year later, and people started knowing me for my work instead. And so it's like you have those little moments of things. I think another one is like ESPN and CNN building. I had gone there when I was like 18 for an interview, and I was so nervous. I had spilt, like, on my way up to the interview, I spilled coffee on my outfit. So that was one. Then I have the interview. It does not go well at all. And this lady just cannot stop staring at my coffee. Then coming back down, I'm so nervous. I backed my car into a pillar, and everybody in the building watched, and it became a running joke amongst the CNN offices. And then flash forward years later, because of my legislative work and my TikTok and stuff, CNN offered me a job. And I was like, well, this is a little full circle. And they were like, "Yeah, you're a long days away from backing your car into a pole and having coffee spilt on you." And I was like, "Oh." So they were fully aware, and they were like, "Yeah, you're a legend in the office," because everyone talks about that story, and they're like, "Don't back your car into a pole." And we have a giant sign now that says that. So moments like that, and it's like all you can do is laugh, and then crazy set experiences always. So yeah.
I would love to see that sign, to be honest, if you ever pick.
Yeah.
There's some crazy stories, definitely. Before we do like the little bit of my typical wrap-up question, your team did mention the upcoming Oscars with awards and stuff. Don't have as much information on that, but curious to hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, so the documentary about me, Fenice, is currently qualified. So it's on the for your consideration circuit right now. So we've been campaigning that as much as possible. And then we basically find out if we've secured a nomination slot. We secured the qualification, and then now we find out if we secured the nomination slot come January, I think. And then for the NAACP, same situation with the film that I directed called All the Men's Hangers, which is a narrative film. And that's been on the film festival circuit for the past year. And then we're distributing that this coming February after the NAACP awards.
What's the funnel of like the number of people that qualify, I guess, until getting like to the nomination? Like, what's the funnel look like? I'm actually not familiar.
I'm not sure what the numbers look like, but basically there are two ways to qualify for Oscars. It's essentially you qualify by winning a festival, which is an Oscar qualifying festival, or your film played in theaters or was distributed. So it had to have played in a commercial theater in a major city like Miami, LA, New York, etc., Chicago, for a week long, every single day, like a actual theater showing. So ours actually played in theaters here in LA for like a week or two, every single day with a showing. And so that's how we qualified. And then once qualified, it's just really campaigning and pushing the project as much as possible. And for voters, the Academy members vote. And so basically for your consideration time, it's awards right now in LA. So every event, it's like every single day there's events, going to one after this, but it's just like all the studios, streamers pushing, and it's definitely a little harder, I'd say, on the indie side compared to being like your short that's going for best short documentary from Netflix, for example. So Netflix is putting in, you know, millions of dollars into their push for it. So they're throwing some of the most extravagant events and things like that. And I go to all of those because I'm in the guilds and also, you know, have the ability to vote for the guild awards. But on our end, it's like we have a great publicist, which I'd say we're fortunate to be able to afford, because that's also like a lot of indie filmmakers can't do that at all. They can't even do that. So they just forego qualifying at all. But it's not like we're at Netflix level putting, you know, 18 mil into campaigning a short. So
Yeah, that makes sense. And my last question for you here is overall a reflection on your time in LA, and then what you envision your life in terms of like how it will look both professionally and like kind of personally in the next 1 to 2 years and like 5 to 10 years, if you had to map out exactly like your dream life.
okay, wrapping up LA. I think LA has been really great. It's not my favorite place in the world. I'm trying really hard to move. I mean, I'm pretty bi-coastal right now, LA and New York, and I'm fortunate to do that, but I would definitely like to live out of New York City and just fly in whenever needed for LA, but it like winds up being every dang week. I'm on set like usually 3 times out of a week, which I'm lucky to say that because I feel like a lot of people aren't working in the industry right now, but I've had consistent work pretty much for the past, you know, 4 years, and I feel really fortunate for that. But I don't like traffic, and I don't like the LA scene, and I don't really like influencers. And no offense to influencers, but I don't like them, and I don't like my interactions with them. LA people, however, LA natives are really great and really wonderful, and a lot of people in the industry are really wonderful. But yeah, I'd like to get out of here for sure. Except, you know, I'm always here, so we'll see. I'm trying to determine where I'll be buying a house next year for my 25th birthday, but it might be out here, so don't quote me and that I, you know, hate it here. In terms of where everything's going, yeah, I guess that's kind of like the first step of dream life and things that I've been working for and wanted is like owning property and a house and being able to have bought that like cash. I don't want to have a mortgage. Like being able to buy a house cash is my ideal. Just kind of putting down roots of like, okay, I built a thing and it's been working, and then long term just continuing to do what I'm doing now except more consistently. So I think when I say that, I'm on set right now all the time, but that's not always for films. It's also for commercial stuff, and sometimes I'm producing for other people, sometimes I'm directing, sometimes I'm writing for other people. I think I really enjoy all of these things. However, my main goal would be, you know, direct probably 2 features a year, and go relax for like 4 months out of the year, travel, do other things, go home, go back to Italy and spend time with family over there and spend time over there. And I think just kind of expanding my company more and more down the line, opening a lot situation. I don't know that that would be here in California. I don't know that it would be in Georgia or somewhere, but somewhere here in the United States for sure, opening a lot that's like Warner size and just having a full-fledged, constantly rotating company, putting out and signing more creatives. I think in the past 3 years, we've signed 3 directors who have directed other projects through our company. And I think being able to do that more and having, you know, like 15 directors who are directing projects like a year on top of what I'm directing through my company, would be the ideal. And then obviously like the feature film that I'm in pre-production for is like the goal really of directing a multi-million-dollar picture and working with the studios as much as possible, in terms of financing. But I do like also just not working with the studios and having creative control, and I would like to maintain that as long as possible. And I don't know how realistic it is that I will maintain 100% ownership of my company through the years, just with the state of the industry and everything. But I'd like to for as long as possible. And then I think just always being able to give back and be in a place to mentor others. So really expanding our mentorship program and just what I'm able to do in terms of giving back. I think that's always a big part of everything I do. Is there's really no point if you can't open the door for the next group of people who want to do this and don't have the ability to, and providing cameras for people and things like that. So that's all important to me. And then on the legislative side, I think I really tried not to, and I got roped into it. And I think in the next 2 years, I will likely run for something legislation wise and Congress and things like that, and having a seat at the table. That's something that matters to me, and having a voice. On the other hand, I always just think like I could just get really rich and fund a candidate to run and pay for things that I want change to happen and open other organizations. So that's an opportunity, an option too, but I don't know yet. I think about running, and I think I will likely pass more legislation for survivors. I've been trying to pass ending child marriage here in California for the past year, and we get a little closer every day. So I'm like, likely that's my main focus in that realm. And then, yeah, I think just always being a role model and someone who's real. And then I'm working on I have a children's book coming out this winter, and then I'm working on my autobiography book right now. And I think that's really it. It's just everything I'm doing right now, I want to keep doing and not ever have to worry about, am I spending a lot of money doing this, and what does that look like, and be fortunate enough to keep working and put people up as well and give them opportunities as well.
Well, Sabrina, regardless of how it ends up looking, I know you'll be successful, and I know you'll have an impact on other people's lives, as you already are doing. I really enjoyed the conversation, especially kind of hearing a life so foreign to mine. Definitely different than the corporate world that I'm in here in New York. So it's definitely interesting to hear all those things. I really appreciate your time here, and excited to get this one out the door.
Of course. Thank you for having me.